I now declare this 92nd meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in order. Colleagues, you'll note that today we have with us the Auditor General and Lynn Sachs, Assistant Auditor General. Colleagues, our main duty is oversight of government expenses and reviewing the audits of the Auditor General. Today we will be performing our duties as the oversight of the actual department of the Auditor General. And so before you have the opening comments from Mr. Ferguson, our Auditor General. You will also find the Auditor General's 2011-2012 performance report and the report on plans and priorities for 2013-14. So looking in the past to see what was done last year, looking forward to see what is being proposed this year. When we've concluded our discussions, colleagues, I will have two questions to put to you in terms of estimate votes to determine whether or not we agree with the estimates that have been tabled by the Auditor General, and forward to that vote on to our colleagues in the whole House. Unless there are any questions as to procedure, I will have us move ahead. I'm not seeing anyone indicate any need to interject. So with that, Mr. Auditor General, I will turn the floor over to you. Mr. Ferguson, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we are pleased to be here and would like to thank you for this opportunity to discuss our 2011-12 performance report and our 2013-14 report on plans and priorities. With me today is Lynn Sachs, Assistant Auditor General of Corporate Services and Chief Financial Officer. Le Parlement nous a
Parliament has given us the mandate to support its oversight of government spending and performance with our financial audits, performance audits, and special examinations of Crown corporations. We are privileged to serve Parliament by providing the objective information, advice, and assurance that result from this work. All of our audits are conducted according to Canadian auditing standards and Canadian standards on quality control. We subject our system of quality control to internal practice reviews and monitoring to provide assurance that you can rely on the quality of our work.
2011-12 fiscal year, the period covered by our most recent performance report, we used $89.8 million of the $94.6 million in parliamentary appropriations available to us, resulting in a lapse of $4.8 million. We had a budget of 633 full-time equivalent employees and employed the equivalent of 640 full-time employees, an increase of 11 from the year before. With these resources, we completed all but 3 of our planned 145 financial and performance audits, special examinations of Crown corporations, and the work of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. In addition, we completed 3 performance audits that were not planned in our 2011-12 report on plans and priorities. We also completed the majority of our renewal of audit methodology project on time and on budget, with the final components completed a few months ago. Notre rapport sur le rendement.
Our 2011-2012 performance report contains a number of indicators of the impact of our work and measures of our operational performance. The tables containing our targets and actual performance results are attached to this statement. Our performance report shows that we met many of the targets for our indicators of impact. The report indicates that the office participated in 29 committee hearings and briefings compared to 46 the previous year, and that parliamentary committees reviewed 43% of our performance audits compared to 62% in 2010-2011. The report also shows that departments had made satisfactory progress in addressing 62% of the 42 recommendations we made in the original audits. Our measures of organizational performance remained positive, with our on-budget performance for most of our financial audits improving over the previous year. Our 2012 employee survey indicated that employee engagement remained high, with 95% of employees feeling proud to work for the office.
In 2014, our first priority is to complete the renewal of the office's strategic plan. We are undertaking a comprehensive review of what we do and how we do it. We are looking to identify areas where we can make meaningful improvements to better serve Parliament and build on the strengths of the office. We would appreciate your input, and we will be looking to engage you in this process. The results of this review will be presented in our 2014-15 report on plans and priorities. This year, we will also continue to implement our strategic and operating review plan that we submitted to Parliament in October 2011. This review helped us to focus our audits on the areas of greatest risk. We are on target to discontinue all of the federal and territorial financial audits that we had identified. C'est dans le cadre de nos audits de performance.
The majority of our interaction with Parliament is through our performance audit practice. We conduct audits that examine the efficiency, economy, and environmental impact of federal government departments, agencies, and other organizations. We had made reductions to our performance audit practice over the past couple of years. As a result of our strategic and operating review plan, we proposed no further reductions to our performance audit work in 2013-2014. We have attached to this statement a list of our planned audits.
Will be to reduce our budget by over $6.5 million, which will be somewhat offset by additional funding for economic increases, and to reduce our staff levels by about 10%. We plan to reduce our staff for 2013-14 to 590 from 615 last year, on our way to our target of 576 in 2014-15. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, my staff and I appreciate your ongoing interest in and support for our work. We look forward to continuing our work to assist you in holding the government to account for its management of public funds. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'd be pleased to answer your questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. I appreciate your opening remarks. Now, colleagues, we'll begin our discussions in the usual rotation, beginning with Mr. Saxton. You now have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Auditor General and the Assistant Auditor General for being here today and for your report. I'd just like to ask you, Auditor General, what are your main priorities for this year coming forward?
For the year 13-14?
The upcoming year.
The priorities are laid out in the document called Report on Plans and Priorities for 2013-14, including all of the performance indicators, you know, the measures, and specifically, I guess, for 13-14, it's listed on page 8, where we have said that we are to continue to implement our strategic and operating review proposal, and also to renew our strategic plan. So those are our two specific priorities for 13-14. But the document does also lay out all of our performance measures.
Okay. Now, last year when you came before committee, you were asked whether, as a new Auditor General, you had any plans to make any changes to the Office of the Auditor General. I think at that time you mentioned that if there were any changes, they would be more evolutionary rather than revolutionary, so to speak. They would be smaller changes rather than big changes. And I just wanted to ask, you know, what has evolved over the last year, and do you anticipate any changes to the Office of the Auditor General?
I think over the last year, a number of things have happened. As I stated, we have had to implement or complete the implementation of our updated methodology, so the approach that we use to audits, to make sure that you know, that we're staying abreast of best practices. So that's been significant. You know, and the other significant thing that we have started is our whole strategic planning exercise for the office. I've been told that it's been about 10 years since the office has undertaken a complete strategic planning exercise. So that is something that is underway. I think other than that, there have been some changes within the office, but again, they are on the margins. You know, I probably interact a little differently with performance audits than my predecessor and things like that. So there have been some changes, but they've really been internal and on the margins. Okay,
now thank you. When it comes to performance and financial audits, I mean, obviously you're doing both of those, but don't you think that it is hard to conduct a performance audit without taking a critical look at the numbers as well?
In a performance audit, what we do is we set the objective of that audit. So we determine what is it that we want to look at. We then establish criteria. We establish sort of what the benchmarks are, what we can measure against. Certainly in a performance audit, you know, we do attempt to look at indicators, whether they be financial or performance indicators, and include those in the audits. Some performance audits focus more on numbers, whether they be performance numbers or financial numbers, than others. Some performance audits, you know, lend themselves less to that type of review. But certainly it's a consideration we have every time we're planning a performance audit.
Okay. Now, in the past, your office has conducted peer audits of other auditors general around the world, and vice versa. You've also been audited by other auditors general. Do you have any of those planned over the next year?
To the best of my knowledge, I believe there are no peer audits for our office planned.
Correct.
We will be participating in a peer review of the GAO in the U.S., and I believe perhaps one other as well over the next year. But we are participants in those. We are not the leads on them.
Right. Okay. Now, you mentioned that your budgeted figure versus your actual expenses, there was a $4.8 million savings, I believe it was. Can you share with us how you were able to achieve those savings?
It's all been a result of our strategic and operating review. And during the year, one of the things that we were looking at doing was reducing some of the financial audits or some other audits that we were required to do, but we didn't feel included or were of much value. So we managed to reduce some of those. Actually, we managed to reduce maybe some of those earlier than we anticipated. Also, we have made, I suppose, various administrative changes in the office, which have helped us get there as well. So it's been a bit of both, a bit of reduction on the actual audit side as well as on the administrative side. But all of the reductions that we made were consistent with the plan that we had put together.
Okay, thank you. Time has expired. Over now to Mr. Allen. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ferguson, for being with us, and Madame Sachs. I noted in your comments, Mr. Ferguson, you talked about a reduction of $6.5 million coming up in the projected budget of 2013-14, and reduction of staff of about 10% from down to 590 from 615, on your way to a target of 576, according to the notes you have here. And I noted you said the effort will be made to do this through attrition, where I'm assuming where possible. Can you give me a sense of what that attrition might look like? Because if folks are in one area or another, and there's more folks in that area who are on the cusp of leaving, shall we say, whether that be retirement or simply moving on, what kind of impact that has in the flow of people leaving to get to this target vis-a-vis having to let someone go, if you will, through redundancy?
I think the fact that we have, we've had a couple of years to implement this does mean that we will be able to manage most of the reduction through attrition. I would actually say that the impact on us is more at the recruitment end. So again, I think for the most part the attrition is going to happen, and that will help us get down on the numbers. But the other thing it means is that we can recruit fewer people at the entry level, and that has a bit of an impact on some of the audit work that we do. So work that we would normally assign maybe to somebody at an entry level, if we have fewer of those folks, then some of that work maybe has to be done by somebody who is in their second year rather than their first year. So I think sort of the challenge in the reduction for us really is more perhaps at the entry level rather than at the level of the folks who are leaving.
So that would lead one to conclude, as you do, planning, human resource planning, which I'm sure, an organization of that size needs to do, because you need certain expertise. If there's a reduction at the front end, if I can use that term, of new folks coming in who you're looking to keep over a longer period of time and obviously gain experiences and become seniors in the department, in your planning forecast, I'm sure folks in your resource sector, human resource sector, are looking at that. Do they see that as a potential, I don't want to call it danger, because that's a strong word, but that's a real potential for a department that isn't, firing on all cylinders, maybe I can phrase it that way?
Certainly we do a lot of resource planning, and looking at the whole mix of our employees is something that that we do keep an eye on. We do have fairly regular turnover in staff. We have a number of staff who, in the middle level of the organization, will leave. Many of them go to work in other government departments, which actually, from our perspective, is a good thing, to have people in departments who have been through the office, understand what we do, and that sort of thing. So that's a good thing. Certainly, though, it's one of the main challenges that we have on the human resource side is monitoring that mix of employees, making sure that we have the right mix, both at the entry level, the mid levels, and the senior levels.
So we could, if we take you to a different place, there's some statistics that, that have come forward that your engagement with this committee has actually shrunk from 62% back in 2009 to 2010 to 43% in 2011. So any sense of how we can improve that engagement? Because we'd truly like to see you here more often, Mr. Fergus. We actually enjoy the information you bring to us besides your personal company, which I always find heartwarming, to be truthful. Is there any suggestions for this committee as to how we can work in a more collaborative way that can allow you to be here more often?
When I look at the numbers of chapters that we produce that have hearings, and in our numbers we look at all of the work of the office and whether it gets before a committee, it doesn't really matter what committee. The thing that actually stands out the most for us is on the side of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. I think, in the year, I believe it was 11-12, I believe there were, I'm going to say 7, it might have been 8 chapters produced by the Commissioner, and during that year none of them had a hearing in front of any committee. So I think for the chapters that we produced, sort of Office of the Auditor General, under the Auditor General side of things, I think maybe there were 15, yes, there were 15 chapters, and 10 of them had, at least one hearing. But on the side of the Commissioner, it was 0 out of 8. So I think that's what probably concerns us most as the office is, because in the office, the section that's devoted to the Commissioner, they do performance audits. It's all done under the same type of methodology, but there were no committee hearings on those chapters in that year.
Thank you very much. Moving on to, and before I just go to our next speaker, may I welcome Mr. Harris, who has joined us today. Good to have you with us, sir. Mr. Cramp, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Auditor and Sachs. Auditor General, what percent of your budget is wages, salary?
Yep. We spent about $72 million of our $85 million in funds is salary.
Okay,
however
so
that works out.
A large proportion naturally. Yeah. The other expenditure, how would you break it down? Just give me
travel and contracting, there's about 5% in travel and probably another 5% professional services, and then you'd have the rest is the 5% is the miscellaneous.
Okay, thank you. And the reason I'm just sort of mentioning that, we were fortunate. We actually have a number of members of this committee just returned from an international responsibility where we worked with another government, basically third world country that needed a little bit of assistance. We were discussing the issues of governance and accountability and oversight, and certainly met with their Auditor General and a lot of the financial people and the senior ministers. And there is no doubt that, yes, they do need help. And so what I would like to know, obviously our main focus has to be on what we do here. That's your principal role. But internationally, do you have a particular focus internationally when you do reach out? And do you focus on either key countries or unions or geographic areas?
Mr. Chair, we do a number of things on the international front. We have what's called a Fellows Program, for example, which is funded through CETA, and we will bring in auditors from different countries. Right now we have an auditor from Cameroon, one from Ghana, one from Tanzania, and one from Vietnam in the office. They stay with us for about 9 months. They work as part of the teams on various audits. So that's sort of a very hands-on way that we do things. We also provide some funding to the CCAF, the Canadian Comprehensive Audit Foundation. They do a lot of training in audit offices around the world on performance audit, on financial audit. So that's another way that we get involved. We also, I guess a little differently, but we are also the auditor of the International Labour Organization, one of the UN organizations. So we are we do the financial audit of that, and some performance audit work that is paid for entirely by that organization. So we have a number of different areas whereby we are doing international work.
Okay, thank you. We found a common theme just in a brief discussion with a few of the countries, and I'm just wondering if you have shared the same observation. Most of their focus, regretfully, was on compliance audits rather than performance audits. And so quite obviously there's a huge difference in benefit to that country. Have you found that to be a bit of a constant theme through some of the developing countries? And obviously, we're here. Your focus is not solely, but largely on performance audits. Could you comment?
Yeah, I think it's certainly very fair to say that a number of developing countries are, they're working their way through trying to be able to do performance audits. Performance audits are different than financial audits. The underlying concept is the same in terms of you're trying to essentially answer a question. You're trying to gather enough evidence that you can draw a conclusion. But financial audits are much more structured, and from year to year they are pretty similar. And you do financial audits of the same things every year. Performance audits are different in that every time you're looking at something different, it may be something that's never been looked at before. Or if it has been looked at before, it's maybe 5 or 10 years, in the past. So they're very different, and I think a lot of developing countries struggle to understand that difference and get to the point where they can do good performance audits.
Okay, I think a point that is very important. You're moving forward with the short-term strategic outcomes, what you're looking for from Parliament and that. So at what point in the process do you see yourself engaging Parliament? Whether it's government and or opposition, how do you see yourself engaging us in that particular area of achieving the strategic outcomes that you're looking for?
In terms of our strategic outcomes, we do things like survey members of committees, and I believe that has recently gone out. That we sent out a survey to all members of committees to get feedback. We are also in the process, as I mentioned, of putting together our own strategic plan, and that is one thing that we do intend to do, is to meet with members of this committee to get input from this committee on the work that we do, how we do it, what we do, and what is of value to the members of the committee. So that's something that we intend to do over the next number of months.
Great. We look forward to that opportunity.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Cramp. Time has expired. And now over to Madame Blachette-Lamotte. You have the floor, ma'am.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today, Mr. Ferguson. I don't want you to have to repeat yourself. However, I would like to come back to the issue of the number of audits. When you appeared on the 15th of May 2012, I put questions to you regarding your forecast for audits, and you told us at the time that you expected to have 33 performance audits for 2011-2012. I was surprised with that forecast of about 30 audits because there had been 26 performance reports. But you said that despite cuts, you didn't think that you would reduce the number of performance audits. And today, for 2012-2013, we see that there were 23 performance audits that were conducted. So is that not a decrease compared to what was done previously and what you actually forecasted yourself?
I don't have sort of all of the numbers specific right in front of me. But again, the thing to remember is that in the office, there are the audits that we do and release as audits of the Auditor General. There are also the audits that we do as the audits of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. I guess we were saying in 11-12 there were 23. I'm not quite sure on the 33. I don't have those numbers in front of me to actually be able to do a specific comparison. What I can say, though, is we haven't seen any marked reduction in the number of performance audits that we are doing. I would have to go back to try and figure out exactly where the 33 was and the 23 to give you a comparison of those numbers.
So actually it was 30 and 23, but that's fine. I understand that you wouldn't have the numbers before you, so if you do have the opportunity to take a look at them, perhaps you could let us know. Now, you stated that you expect to reduce your staff by 10%, your office staff. And you say that this will not affect the number of audits, and I'm happy to believe that. However, I do have a problem in believing that a 10% reduction in staff will not have an impact anywhere, because all those people in your office, I'm sure, are doing important work and good work. So perhaps you could just tell us about what will be affected and to what extent when there is that 10% cut.
The impact on the audits that we do, there are a couple of things. First of all, as part of our strategic and operating review, we did identify a number of pieces of work that we were doing that we felt we didn't need to do anymore. So we've been going through reducing those. So those were audits that we were doing, but we felt they really weren't adding a lot of value, and I think we spoke to that last time. So there has been a reduction in the number of audits we do on the financial audit side. On the performance audit side, I think the impact has been a few years ago, the office reduced the number of performance audits that it was doing. Part of that was to put resources towards what we've referred to as the Renewal of Audit Methodology project. So we've renewed or we've redone how we do performance audits. So in order to staff that project up, we had to take some performance auditors and put them on that project. At that time, the number of audits were reduced. Now, it's my understanding that the original intention was that when that project was finished, that might allow us to have people to put back into those audits. That won't be happening, though.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Une très rapide question, s'il vous plaît.
A very quick question. In your opening remarks, you said that departments have made satisfactory progress and they've followed up on 62% of the 42 recommendations. So that's approximately 18 recommendations that the department did not follow up on. Is that a normal number to not follow up on? And can you expect any answers in the future? So how could they justify that 18 of those recommendations that you made were not followed up on within the departments?
When we do performance audits, when we do a follow-up performance audit, that's what we are looking to do, right? We are saying, okay, here's what we recommended in the past, and on each recommendation that we are looking at again, we say, was the progress satisfactory or was it not satisfactory? Now, it may be the case that even though the progress was not satisfactory on certain recommendations, departments maybe have made some progress. Or if we are doing a performance audit, it may not be a follow-up audit, but if it includes in there something that we have looked at before, we will do the same thing. So it's something that we are always looking at. It's the focus of our follow-up audits is to determine the degree to which departments are implementing the recommendations. we obviously would like to see a better percentage of the recommendations being implemented when we do this. I'm not sure exactly what our target is for that particular measure. I'm sure it's listed in the report. I think it's 100. Okay. It's probably close to 100, if not 100%. So certainly we like to see, or we want to see, departments implement our recommendations, and that's why we do the follow-up audits, so that we can report back to this committee, in fact, on whether the departments are satisfactorily implementing our recommendations.
Thank you. Time has expired. Just before I go on, however, though, far be it from me to come to any kind of rescue to the Auditor General, but I want to remind colleagues that we did receive a letter dated October 26, 2011, from the Interim Auditor General, John Worsama, advising that these cuts were coming and affording the committee an opportunity to meet with the Auditor General to discuss that impact. The committee, in its wisdom, has not chosen to date to do anything with it. In rotation, Mr. Aspen, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Auditor and Madame Sachs. You alluded to this previously, Mr. Ferguson, with regard to your strategic plan, and I know you've launched a renewal of the strategic plan, and it's a review, I guess, of what you do and how you do it. Can you share with us why specifically you chose to do this exercise?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. I think probably for a few reasons. One, as somebody coming new into an organization, I wanted to make sure that I understand our strategy. So, I felt it was important to undertake a review of our strategy. As I said, it's something that sort of from a top to bottom perspective has not been done in a number of years. So it was due, and we're undertaking the exercise by what's called a balanced scorecard approach. So looking at the work that we do from various different perspectives, trying to understand the work we do from various different perspectives. So I think it was simply a matter of it was due, and I was new to the organization and felt that I needed to understand our strategy.
Okay, and I understand the renewal of audit methodology, which is, in short acronym, is RAM project, responded to changes in international and Canadian auditing standards, as well as renewing the office's audit methodology and updating the design and documentation of your quality management system. How does your current project differ from the RAM project, and what are the expected outcomes?
Mr. Chair, the difference is the RAM project was specifically looking at how we do audits. It was the process, it's the training, it's the manuals, it's the documentation, it's all of the details of how we do audits, making sure that the way we do audits is rigorous, conforms with Canadian auditing standards. So that's what the RAM project was. The project we are doing now is looking at the office's overall strategy and what we do as an office. So the first one was very much drilling down into the details of the aspects of how we go about it. Now what we're doing is we're looking at the broader picture of our strategy.
Do I have any time, Chair?
Well, a couple of minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I understand when making appropriations in the estimates process for the coming fiscal years, how do you prioritize your office activities? Do you set a quota for audits and schedule different departments, agencies, and programs accordingly to meet that quota? And how does your office account for unexpected needs of Parliament in the estimates?
when we put our budget together, Mr. Chair, the first thing, of course, is the financial audits that we have to do, because the financial audits are, they're audits of financial statements. We do roughly 120 of them, including the Public Accounts of Canada, and then financial statements of various different Crown corporations and agencies. So, and those have to be done every year. So that's sort of the first chunk of our budget. Then what we do is we look at the resources that we have to do performance audits, and we go through a very rigorous planning process which looks out probably 3 or 4 years to determine where we are going to put our resources on the performance audit side. That's done using a risk-based approach. So part of our activities is to do what we call strategic audit plans. So for different pieces of the government's business, we will go in and we will do risk assessments and then determine which areas that we think we want to do performance audits on, and we will look out over a 3 or 4 year time period to determine which audits that we want to do. Certainly in that, if parliamentarians have things they want us to look at, we are always, we're always happy to receive those, that input. We will take it and we'll put it into our whole planning process to determine, whether those specific items are things that we should be looking at versus what we had already planned to look at.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Aspin, time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Moving on to Mr. Byrne. You have the floor, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you to Mr. Ferguson and to Madam Sachs. To an average Canadian, concerned about government oversight and ensuring the efficiency and effectiveness of government spending, it might seem a little bit counterintuitive that one would be proposing an increase in surveillance or increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of government spending as a general program or strategy or goal, while at the same time cutting the budget of the Office of the Auditor General. Would you be able to comment to us about the role that the Office of the Auditor General can provide, as well to the internal audit function about ensuring effectiveness and efficiency of taxpayer spending?
Mr. Chair, I think one thing that we've noticed over the last number of years is there has been a change in internal audit, sort of an increased focus on internal audit within the federal government. And that has also altered how we do performance audits, because we take into account very much the work that happens in internal audit, so that we're not going in and duplicating an area unless for some reason we feel that needs to be duplicated. So that's something that certainly has impacted us, and I think it shows that in terms of overall accountability, there's a role for internal audit, there's a role for external audit, which is what we do. Those two complement each other, but they are both important components of the overall government accountability picture.
That, Mr. Ferguson, would be one of the reasons why the Office of the Auditor General now is removing or distancing, not distancing, it's stopping doing financial audits on 25 different departments and agencies and organizations. Is it because the financial auditing is actually something that there's a certain body of expertise within the private sector, and you want to focus more on performance legislative auditing? Would that be fair to say?
No, our financial audit practice is very important to us. It's robust. We have a lot of expertise in terms of, government accounting, government accounting systems, and that type of thing. Where we were moving away from some of the financial audits, where we identified some, it was more on the end of, we were doing some of these financial audits, but we really didn't feel, either we didn't feel we were adding a lot of value in them, or it was a case of, these are perhaps organizations that are regulating the private sector, and they could recover their costs of audit as opposed to getting sort of the service free from us. So that was another consideration. Also, there was a requirement for us to do, I think, there were 3 organizations that every year we were supposed to evaluate their performance report. So there were many other government organizations that we were not mandated to review their performance report every year, but there were about 3 that we were. So those 3, their performance reports were getting looked at every year, and others were not. So we can still look at those performance reports of those 3 organizations, but now we can choose which ones we want to look at, as opposed to being directed that it has to be these 3, which meant they were always being looked at and the others were not being looked at. So it was a number of those types of things that went into our decisions.
From a parliamentary oversight point of view, one of the factors that does limit the capacity of Parliament to look into matters related to Crown corporations in particular is the fact that many Crown corporations, not all, but many Crown corporations are not covered under the Access to Information Act. Whereas, and that's part of the role or value that the Office of the Auditor General may be able to provide is being able to shine some light into some pretty opaque corporations, in that there's not a whole lot of information that gets shared, or the capacity for Parliament or parliamentarians to be able to look into Crown corporations. Do you take that into consideration in terms of which financial audits or which Crown corporations you do special examinations on? Is that part of the mix?
Certainly, it's our special examination practice that I think gets to a lot of those types of questions. We are required by legislation to look at most Crown corporations. I won't say all, because I think there are, a couple of exceptions. But over a 10-year period, we are mandated to do a special examination looking at their systems of internal controls and that type of thing, and reporting to their boards on those special examinations. And we have to get into each Crown corporation at least once every 10 years. So certainly the special exams allow us to do a bit deeper dive into the practices of the Crown corporations. So I think that is the main part of the practice where we do that.
Okay, sorry, time has expired. Moving along to Mr. Hayes. You have the floor, sir.
I just want to get some clarity in terms on the process for determining the mix of financial audits versus performance audits. I mean, it's pretty clearly understood in terms of cost, performance audits are significantly more expensive. And in terms of ratio, you do 4-to-1 in terms of financial audits versus performance audits. I'm just looking in terms of value for money. And there's a part of me that says, boy, it would be nice to do, 60 performance audits and 80 financial audits as a ratio, because there's a part of me that thinks performance audits are much more valuable than financial audits. So I'm wondering if you can just give me your thought process in terms of how you determine the ratio.
Well, again, it starts from the fact that we are required to do financial audits. So in most cases, I don't know if it's all cases, but it's probably pretty close to all cases, we actually have no choice about doing the financial audits. The organizations exist, they have to have financial audits. We've been named the auditors. In terms of hours, financial audits, when I'm looking at 2012-13, financial audits were about 257,000 hours. Our performance audits, including chapters and including the strategic audit plans that we do, were about 208,000 hours. So even though the number of audits looks very skewed, the fact of the matter is it takes a lot more effort to do many of the performance audits we do, and there are a number of financial audits that are smaller and don't take the same number of efforts. So the hours are more towards financial audit than performance audit, but it's not as big a difference as sort of the number of audits makes it appear. The other thing, though, of course, is as an accountant, financial audits are extremely important. It's important to look at organizations to make sure that their financial statements are properly presented. And I think the fact that most organizations can get clean audit opinions, I guess, speaks to sort of the maturity of financial audit preparation, financial statement preparation now in Canada. So that's a good thing. But having those financial audits, I think, are very important, and making sure that the financial statements are presented fairly is a very important activity.
Can you talk a little bit about ensuring that your audit reports are reliable? And can you speak specifically as well to staff qualifications, whether you have a need to bring in consultants? You mentioned earlier you have some of your auditors are classified as performance auditors and some are classified as financial auditors. So I'm just curious as to the industry expertise that you have, because I mean some of the things you're auditing are highly complex, and if you could kind of enlighten our committee in terms of the reliability factor.
In terms of qualifications, Mr. Chair, of our performance auditors, many of our performance auditors, most of our performance auditors come to us with a different background, not necessarily an accounting background. So we will have, engineers, economists, lawyers, people with training in different areas, not just accountants. We also have, we put them all through training, to make sure that they have the necessary skills to conduct audits. On many of our performance audits, we will also engage advisory committees. So we will bring in, say, 2 or 3 people on contracts to not do the work, but that we can tell them the types of things that we are finding, the types of places that we are looking or want to look, and we can get their advice as people who have expertise. If we get into a situation in a performance audit where something is very specific and we feel that we need expertise we don't have to do a piece of work, then we would contract for that expertise.
I went online and had a look at your performance summary, and I think it was your most recent one, and it spoke to the fact that you completed all of your audits on time, with the exception of 2 performance audits and 1 other audit. But the 2 performance audits that it made reference to, and they were completed eventually, certainly, one was the administration of the Senate of Canada, and one was the administration of the House of Commons. Those were the 2 reports that were mentioned. And as I've sat on this committee, I don't ever recall this committee seeing the administration of the House of Commons, for example. I don't recall that as being a report that crossed this committee. So this kind of speaks to page 18 of your reporting and planning and priorities, where it was mentioned that I think 42% of the performance audits are reviewed by committees, and your goal is to make that greater. So 2 questions. Would this committee see the administration of the House of Commons report? And are we the only committee that is tasked with the responsibility of reviewing your reports, or are other standing committees, are they also tasked with that responsibility in terms of trying to increase your 40%?
Mr. Chair, in terms of the audit of the administration of the House of Commons and the audit of the administration of the Senate, those reports were submitted to, at least as I recollect, were submitted to the different organizations. For example, the Board of Internal Economy, I believe, was where the report on the House of Commons was submitted, and the Senate one was to the Senate committee. I'll get the name wrong. So those 2 were they were different audits. They were done under sort of an understanding originally that was laid out, and the audits were submitted to those different bodies. So that's why they were not submitted to the Public Accounts Committee as per sort of our normal practice. In terms of other standing committees, certainly whenever we release a performance audit, we will write to the chairs of other standing committees, for example, and let them know which chapters that we have released that we feel might be of interest to their committees, so that if they choose to, they could have a hearing on some of those chapters as well, which does happen from time to time.
Okay, thank you. We're well over, but it was an important question. Again, colleagues, I want to remind you, can I have that reference, please? As the letter was before the committee, it's still before the committee. The committee has just not chosen to do anything with it. And another outstanding issue is exactly the audit report. A copy of that report was tabled with us. The committee has the option of holding a hearing or not. And like this correspondence, it's sitting there in that limbo land where the committee has not taken a decision to get rid of it or to hold a hearing. It just sits there. So both those items, important items, are in that limbo land. You're very welcome. I knew you'd appreciate that tidbit of information. We will now move along with rotation, and Mr. Giguère, you have the floor, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the Auditor General's Office for appearing before the committee today. And thank you for the Assistant Auditor General as well. Now, the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Commissioner for Access to Information have stated that it's quite difficult to obtain information from the government. The PBO even had to go to court to obtain information that by law he was supposed to be able to obtain. And now we're being told that the Office of the Auditor General will see a reduction in its staff. So my question is this: will this decrease in staff affect the quality of your work if the majority of the work of that staff was to obtain information and cooperation on the part of the government, that is, to call upon the government to provide information? So there has been reticence noted by judges on the part of the government to provide you with information. So I'd like to know what the impact will be then of those decreases.
Mr. Chair, I think I've spoken sort of in general terms, or fairly specifically, about the impact of the reductions in terms of our audits. I think in terms of, obtaining information, each audit that we do is done according to a rigorous methodology, and we will continue to do that for each and every audit that we do. So the way that we go about an audit isn't changing, and in fact, as I said, we've put in place this new methodology to make sure that what we are doing is quite rigorous. Our experience is that we do get cooperation from government departments when we are trying to obtain information. There was the recent court case where the judge made reference to the fact that there were cases where individuals were not, did not necessarily provide us the information that was requested. And that certainly, of course, is a concern to us. But we do find that sort of is very much the exception rather than the rule. And again, if you go back over a number of years, you will find that there have been those types of incidents in the past. However, in general, we do get good cooperation. We do have an understanding in place, with the government about, access to very sensitive documents and that type of thing. So, in general, we do obtain the information that we need. If we didn't, If we didn't obtain information that we needed, we would bring that to the attention of this committee. We would say it quite clearly in our audit report. If we came across an incident where we felt we were not getting the cooperation that we needed, we would put that right in an audit report.
Okay, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you said that you have some flexibility. It's about $4 million, and that allows you to undertake special projects if necessary. And my fear is this. If you end up cutting your budget, then your ability to react immediately to an event will be lesser. So if there's a specific event that occurs within government or that affects the government, will you still be in a position to be able to react immediately?
Again, when we do a piece of audit work, it is very much a rigorous process that we go through. So in order for us to sort of react quickly, even when we do react quickly and say, okay, we're going to look at something, it will take us probably 12 to 18 months to complete that work, because we have to go through all of that sort of rigorous process, evidence gathering, vetting the information that we're getting, writing reports, clearing facts, and that type of thing. So, that's our process. We are never in a position where sort of, we can look at something and come back very quickly with an answer on it. It has to go through all of that process. Again, the number of audits, performance audits that we are planning to do over the next number of years is very consistent with the number of performance audits that we have been doing over the last couple of years. So we're not anticipating a significant reduction in the level of performance audits that we're doing.
Missy, time is concluded.
Eh bien, Monsieur, dans la mesure où j'ai peu de temps, je vais tout simplement.
Thank you. I just want to take the opportunity to once again thank the Auditor General for coming. And I also like to thank him for the letter he sent me in reply to my letter about the Canada Revenue Agency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Williamson, you have the floor, sir.
It's good to see you both back again. I don't have too many kind of specific, or I don't have too many questions, just a couple. Your decision to, I should say that the budget reductions, those are optional for your office. You could opt in. That's my understanding, that your office and as well as the offices of all the officers of Parliament, it was a request from the government that you undertook. Is that correct?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, we received a letter from Minister Flaherty, I guess at the time, encouraging us to do as the other departments have. But it was definitely our decision to proceed.
Right. Okay. And my follow-up question to that is, do you feel that the budget is adequate for you to discharge your duties as required?
Again, Mr. Chair, the work that we do, a certain amount of the work that we do is required, financial audits, special exams. There are specific legislated requirements for us to do those. Certainly our budget is sufficient to do those things. Then we have a certain amount of our budget that we do performance audits. And the performance audits, is really where we have our discretion in terms of how many that we do. There was a decision taken a few years ago, because part of the consideration of the office in performance audits is also the ability of, this committee, and should there be other committees, but this committee in particular, to be able to deal with the volume of work that we produce.
Right.
And I think a few years ago, there was a determination of sort of the right number of audits that we should be doing, and we've more or less adjusted to that. So right now, we feel that we will be able to continue to do the performance audits, the number of performance audits that we have planned.
Okay. And let me now maybe ask you to comment on this committee. If I understand it, this is the primary committee for the review of your performance audits. I mean, if you look at the numbers that you presented, we've fallen to 43%. We need to up our game here a little bit. your numbers don't say that, but I'm trying to kind of get you to, this is the primary committee that is causing this number to call. I understand that others can choose to review them, but this is the committee where your reports are meant to be reviewed, and if that number at 43% is low, it's in part because we're not doing enough here.
Mr. Chair, again, sort of if I look at the office in the two components, and for the particular year in question, I think that we submitted 15 audits as under sort of the name of Auditor General. 10 of those got in front of committee. There were 8 reports produced by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. None of those got in front of a committee. So again, I think that there needs to be some improvement on getting those chapters in front of committees, and this committee is not necessarily the primary committee for the reports of the Commissioner. However, many of the reports of the Commissioner may be of interest to this committee. Mm-hmm. In terms of the rest, like I said, 10 out of 15. Obviously, you know, we think all of the audits that we do are important, you know, have good information in them, and we would like to see them all, you know, get in front of committee and be discussed in front of the committee.
Right. Absolutely. How much time do we have, Chair? Just probably a minute? Okay. This might not be your field. And if it isn't, just say so. What crowns are not covered currently by ATIP? Do you know?
Mr. Chair, it's not a question I can answer.
No, it just came up earlier, and I just wanted to come back to that. Thank you, Chair. I'm done.
Very well. Thank you. Over to Mr. Byrne again. Mr. Byrne, you have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. There was an earlier request before your term of office, Mr. Ferguson, that the officers of Parliament had requested that parliamentary committees review the independence, among other issues, the independence of parliamentary officers. A request had come in to discuss various the interaction. Are you aware of that particular letter? It was done before your signature was not attached. It was Madame Fraser's and Mr. Worsma's. Are you aware of that particular request?
I'm certainly aware of a letter that came forward before my term.
Is that still an active file amongst officers of Parliament to have a review or consideration of having parliamentary committees understand better the viewpoint of the officers of Parliament to ensuring their independence? Is that a topic amongst your table of officers?
Certainly, I think it's fair that all of the officers of Parliament, you know, want to make sure that parliamentarians understand the role that each officer plays. I think yes, that's something that is of concern to all officers.
Would it be valuable, in your opinion, to have a follow-up discussion about that particular issue with officers of Parliament, or has it, since the initial request was tabled and no parliamentary committee took up the offer?
Chair, point of order. I don't think this has any relevancy to the main estimates that we're here to discuss today. This is not part of the topic.
Well, again, you know my thinking on that there's wide discretion on the part of committee members. If ever there's an open-ended opportunity to ask the Auditor General any question about what they do, this would be the opportunity when we're reviewing their work plan, where we're not focused on the work of an audit. I'll take your point under advisement. I'll listen. But so far, I don't hear anything that's out of order.
So this is a free-for-all, is what you're saying?
I'm saying that Mr. Byrne is in order.
Because it's a free-for-all.
I'm saying Mr. Byrne is in order. Is there a part of that you're not clear on, sir?
Because it's a free-for-all.
Mr. Byrne, you have the floor.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to our invited guests. Sometimes we're a little testy at this table about these kinds of matters. So I'll ask, since a request had been tabled to not only to this committee, but to a number of different parliamentary committees, standing committees of the House of Commons, to review this kind of issue, the interaction, the relationship, the role between Parliament and officers of Parliament. Would you see a value to potentially engaging in that discussion down the road?
Mr. Chair, I guess, what I would say to that is, I think a lot of thought went into the letter that was produced by the agents of Parliament at the time. I think they raised concerns that they felt needed to be addressed, and I think that the things that letter was raising are things that should be considered. So I think I would simply say that I support sort of the letter and the things that it was raising.
Great, thanks, Mr. Ferguson. I think that's a fair-minded response to an issue that it appears to me that the points that were raised in that particular piece of correspondence, not from just anyone, but from 8 agents of Parliament, are still as relevant today as they were when the letter was actually issued probably 3 years ago or 2 years ago, which hasn't been adequately addressed in the minds of some. So I appreciate your frankness on your answer, and it just seems quite sensible that we would want to do that to maximize the role of maximize the ability of Parliament to communicate with these important agents of Parliament, officers of Parliament. So thanks for that. Finally, because I guess I don't have a huge amount of time, Mr. Chair, one of the things that I wanted to are there things that you would like to do that you feel constrained, that you, just because of resources, you are an independent office, you will do as you deem fit and deem best? But of course, we all face constraints because of resources. Are there projects or things that you would really like to take the Office of the Auditor General down a new path if you had the resources to be able to do so?
Mr. Chair, I think that's, the part of the question that we are trying to answer as we're doing our review of our strategic direction and our strategic planning. Because one of the things that we are challenging ourselves with is to understand how we add value, understand how the work that we do adds value, and are there any places where, we should be doing something to add value and we are not. So that's something that I think will come out of that exercise. In general, as I've said, I think there's a lot of value to our financial audits. There's a lot of value in our performance audits. There's a lot of value in what we do in the special exams. So, I think that's all good work with a lot of value. So, if there's anything else, it would be, again, more on the margins rather than, a significant something that's significantly missing, but hopefully we'll be able to answer that question when I'm back here next year at this time and we've been through sort of some of our strategic thinking.
Thanks very much, Mr. Ferguson.
Yes, time has expired. Again, I just want to remind the member that we did have that piece of correspondence from the independent officers of Parliament that came to this committee. There was a decision made by the committee not to hold a hearing on that letter. In continuing in our rotation, Mr. Dreeshen, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the Auditor and Madam Sachs. It's great to see you. And actually, I've been thinking about this last year, and the types of things that you've committed to, and the changes that have been made. And there's I guess one of the things that we're talking about in the 2013-14 report on plans and priorities, you are talking about a lesser number of financial audits. But just to kind of tie into that, are you looking at any different additional financial or managerial oversights that are going to take place for those entities that are no longer going to be audited? You had discussed that somewhat, that you might be changing the focus somewhat in that area. So I just wondered if you look at that, or will you be depending on the internal audit functions of those particular entities?
Mr. Chair, I think a number of those entities will still be the subject of financial audits. They just will not be the subject of a financial audit by us. So a financial audit will be performed, will be presented to the board of those organizations and be made public. I don't think that there are any organizations where the fact that when we made that choice that we would no longer be involved in those audits, that it would result in any sort of significant gap in terms of oversight. That certainly was part of our consideration, was to make sure there would not be that type of gap in oversight.
Thank you. And now, when you are doing audits, just to kind of look at the process, when you get into the middle of it and you say, well, we have more or less budgeted this amount of time or this amount of money to this particular project, when you get into the middle of it, how flexible are you to be able to, if you find something that you feel that you have to delve into a little bit more, do you have that flexibility? Does your audit team have that flexibility? I know one of the things that we've talked about a lot over the years was this concept of being on time and on budget. And I do appreciate the fact that certainly we have seen it outlined in more detail rather than simply a footnote as to what being on time and on budget is all about. But I wonder if you could address perhaps both of those issues, the idea of being on time and on budget, and also the flexibility of being able to come in and transfer resources into an area as you are moving forward in your audits.
Mr. Chair, when we do our budgeting, we look at, we spend a lot of time on budgeting, how much time is going to be spent on each audit. And what we will do, particularly on financial audits, is we will put together a budget that is essentially a budget that represents if there are no problems. How long do we think it's going to take us if there are essentially no problems? Then we will also build in a 15% buffer that allows our teams to go beyond the original budget by another 15%. Then we actually have a second buffer for very, very significant cases. So we do have flexibility within our budgeting to deal with situations as they arise. And quite frankly, we want to make sure that budgeting, that when we're budgeting audits, we need to make sure we have the right incentives, because when we are doing an audit, the thing that's the most important is that the audit brings to light whatever issues need to be brought to light. That, in fact, is more important than sort of being on time. It's making sure that we get the right issues. So we want to make sure that we are using those as tools to manage the audits, but not as tools that will be disincentives to actually finding the things that need to be found. So that's the balancing act that we have to have when we are doing our budgeting.
Okay, if I have just a moment left, I'd like to take you to indicator table 2, the summary of organizational performance. This was in the submission that we have in front of us today. And on the last page, or my last page, we talked about percentage representation relative to workforce availability, and you go through, with different demographics there. And I'm just wondering if you can kind of explain a bit of what is happening. I know that we've talked about the, how they feel that working for the Office of the Auditor General is one of the best places that you can work here in as far as Canada is concerned. Can you kind of tie those two things together? I mean, the numbers that we see here for these percentages and what is happening in your office.
Yeah, I'll take that question. Yes, the results of our surveys have shown that we are a good place to work. People like working with us. This is a second analysis, obviously. If you're comparing it to how we are meeting percent of representation, that's very much a function of hiring and people who are leaving. And if we are approaching the right people, are we outreaching areas where we are weak in our recruitment activities? Where our hands get tied, and you'll find the one area that we have a little work to do, although we are doing well in all areas, is the members of visible minorities. And at a time of low recruitment, it is difficult for us to fix those numbers because we're not going out there and hiring 20 or 30 students like we might have in the past. So that is one of our current struggles, although we have been told by the Human Rights Commission when they came to do an audit, I believe it was on these numbers, that we were actually a model organization. So partly is people like to stay, people enjoy the work, the challenge, and also because we are trying to be a very flexible organization. I think those are two key points.
Great. Thank you very much. Time's expired. Moving along to Monsieur Giguère. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, you mentioned that 62% of the 42 recommendations had been followed up on by the departments. However, I'd like to know what that 62% actually means. If it's the 62% reflects the least important recommendations, then there's a serious problem. So you've made recommendations, and at times in some areas those are easy to apply, but at other times your recommendations involve a wholesale change in culture within a department. So when a culture, let's say, is inappropriate, or there's inappropriate behavior, or there's problematic behavior within a department, I'd like to know if, generally speaking, your recommendations are more easily accepted or not. And is it the more technical type of recommendations that are actually followed up on?
When we put that measure together, what we are looking at is again, when we've done a follow-up on our recommendations, has it been satisfactorily implemented? So, I guess almost by definition, we've decided that there are a certain number of recommendations that it's important for us to follow up on. So we would be ourselves, when we are deciding to do that follow-up audit, we would be focusing in on the recommendations that we felt were the most important that the departments implement. So when we're sort of talking about a 60%, there's not really a lot of opportunity for the departments to sort of say, well, okay, we'll implement these few easy ones and not the harder ones, because the measure is really based on us coming in and doing that second audit and picking the recommendations that we felt were the most important to be implemented, whether they were easy, whether they would have been easy or difficult. So in general, I don't think there's a lot of opportunity for departments to sort of skew those results. I think we're sort of in control of it.
I have a similar question. Recently, you evaluated the Port Authority in Old Montreal, and you expressed some reservations. So I'm not sure how to put this question, but we've seen this, say, with the Library of Parliament. When someone has been invited to resign because of their expenditures, and because, for example, they've made inappropriate expenditures, then when you have a minister who has the authority to say to a civil servant, you have abused inappropriately the system, I'd like to know what you yourself can do, especially in the case of the Port Authority. So do you not have the authority to label behavior as being absolutely inappropriate when there's been that kind of spending? Because the minister reacted before you did by asking those people to resign. Why then, when there has been obvious bad management, when there's even been abuse of the system, why do you not take it upon yourself to say that that specific individual has had inappropriate behavior that has to be sanctioned, or rather punished?
Mr. Chair, again, I think our approach to any audit is to look at the systems that are in place to any special exam, or to look at the systems that are in place and to determine whether those systems are appropriate or not, and to bring forward any examples where we feel that there may be problems, and then to present those findings to the organization, the people that are charged with oversight of that organization, and then it's their responsibility to take that information and make sure that appropriate actions are taken, whether that involves correcting the systems and processes or whether that involves actions concerning individuals. So again, we report on what we find as part of our audit, but then it's up to those that are charged with oversight of those organizations to take the appropriate action.
Very good. Thank you. Time has expired, Monsieur. Over to Mr. Saxton for our last round of questioning. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up on my colleague, Mr. Dreeshen's points regarding the OAG as being a popular place to work. We all know that the Office of the Auditor General does great work, and it's also reassuring to know that it's also a good place to work as well. For example, for the 5th consecutive year, the Office of the Auditor General was ranked as one of Canada's top 100 employers, one of the National Capital Region's top 20 employers, and one of Canada's top 10 family-friendly employers. It was also selected as one of the top employers for Canadians over 40. An employee satisfaction survey indicated that 95% of employees feel proud to work at the OAG. I'm just wondering, this is really very positive feedback from people working in the OAG, do you have opportunities for entry-level audit staff as well? And the only thing I saw missing here was the top employer for under 40.
I can answer. I don't think there's an award for best young youth employer. There might be, but we haven't applied for it. So would we win or not? I have no idea. I do believe a lot of the over 40 is caused by our benefits, and again, the flexibility. What we do is important. That's why our youth tend to like us, because out of those 85% or so that said they liked us, our average age is 40. So that means half the office is younger than 40 and happy to be there. I don't know if I can add to the whys behind it, other than that flexibility, but I think I missed it. I missed part of your question. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I missed. Did you need more?
I was just wondering what opportunities for
hiring and for youth. Sorry. Yes.
First jobs.
The one difficulty we have with the strategic operational review is we have decreased our hiring of recent graduates. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, that is one of the byproducts of trying to adjust to a smaller budget. We hope that once we establish the work in our new budget, we can once again, the turnover will allow us to hire as we would like 20 a year, but for this year I believe we've gone down to about 8. So we know they're an important feed to all of our other levels. We know it's important for us to continue that recruitment, so we won't cut it out, but it's going to be a challenge.
Okay. Well, congratulations on your success in any case. In the report, under the title of Strategic Outcome and Expected Results, it says the long-term strategic outcome of the Office of the Auditor General is to contribute to better managed government programs and better accountability to Parliament through legislative auditing. And you have identified a number of results that you expect to achieve with your audits in the short, medium, and long term. And in the short term, you say that you want to engage Parliament, territorial legislatures, and federal and territorial organizations in the audit process. And I just wanted to ask how you intend to do that.
Mr. Chair, I think certainly in terms of engaging Parliament, there are a couple of aspects. One is, as I say, in terms of as we do our review of our strategy, to have conversations, particularly with members of this committee, would be one way of doing that. I think though overall, it speaks to the importance of making sure that our performance audits do get in front of committees, and that parliamentarians are engaged with sort of our output, and again, whether that be at the federal level or the territorial level, because we are the auditors of the three northern territories as well. So, you know, and sort of the functioning of the Public Accounts Committee here versus the functioning of the Public Accounts Committees in the territories are different, and making sure that we are able to engage the committees in the work that we do at all of those levels, you know, I think is probably what we're referring to there.
Okay, thank you. And just finally, you mentioned that in the long term, you want to work to lead to more effective, efficient, and economical government programs and operations, and to programs that foster sustainable development. Could you just expand a little bit more on that?
On the sustainable development piece?
Sure.
I believe the sustainable development piece is it may even be legislated. I mean, I think it's part of it's the mandate really of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. So that's how we you know, that's how we do that piece. Everything that we do, of course, is around trying to find ways to you know, identify opportunities for government programs to be more efficient, more economical, and that type of thing. So that's about, you know, everything that we do is always geared around that. But then we do also have this specific mandate around sustainable development, which is mostly covered off by the group that under the Commissioner of the Environment.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Time has expired, and that concludes the rotation. If I might, Mr. Ferguson, two issues I'd like to follow up on, two macro issues that you raised that affect this committee. The first was, in your report, you noted, and I believe that Mr. Hayes was questioning around the same line about the percentage of your reports that we actually held hearings on. To be fair, there was an election in that time, but I note that 2010-11 also captured a bit of an election period. And to be fair to the committee, the F-35 was like a black hole of time and just sucked up everything. But having said that, I have to say to the committee that I agree with Mr. Hayes that we need to up our game, and I just want to say that having lost the steering committee as a structural element of our work has meant that we do all that work as a committee, and it's all, except for a very small fraction, always done in camera. And in my view, we are spending way too much time in camera fighting about details over meetings that could that could be thrashed out at a steering committee meeting. I urge the committee to reconsider bringing back the steering committee, because I agree with you that if you're doing these audits, that's half the battle. The other half, though, is the public hearing, because it's the public pressure at the end of the day that is the real whip hand here. This committee has no power to do things unilaterally and make things happen. We're not a committee of power, but we are a committee of light, and the ability to give light and attention to your reports is arguably the most important thing we do. So collectively, I hope we embrace that we all have a responsibility to get those numbers up, to be spending less time in camera, more time at public hearings, holding government to account, and going through these audit reports that taxpayers have paid so much money to have developed. The other thing that troubles me, you mentioned about the Environmental and Sustainable Development Commissioner reports, that there were 8 last year and no hearings. I think that's problematic for all of us as parliamentarians, at least it should be, given the fact that there's really nothing more important right now facing the future of our planet than the issue of the environment and Canada's role. So I would ask you, Mr. Ferguson, if you have any suggestions. Obviously, it's our domain to decide as parliamentarians, but your advice would be helpful. Do you think that this committee should take ownership of a percentage of them, which would be something new we've never done before? Do you think that the Environment Committee should give assurances to the House that they're going to be holding some kind of hearings? Should there be joint hearings? This troubles me, that there were 8 audits on a file this important from the Environmental Commissioner, and there were no public hearings. Your thoughts, sir, on how to fix it?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I think first of all, for clarification, there were 8 with no hearings in the year that we looked in the year of reporting. I believe one of those 8 did later on, after this year, did get a hearing, but it's still only 1 out of 8. So that's just for clarification. Okay. One thing that I am planning on doing is in the future, as we do with special exams. So for example, we do special examinations of Crown corporations, and then we put together a summary chapter of our special exams for this committee, and then the committee can decide whether to have hearings on any of those. I want to do the same thing for the reports of the Commissioner. So the Commissioner releases his or her reports. We would put together a summary, just like we do special exams, put it in front of this committee, and then the committee can decide whether there are any of those that are of interest. And I think that some of the reports that the Commissioner puts out do have, they do have sort of financial aspects to them as well. So I think some of them maybe can very much fit within sort of, the public accounts world as well. So I think it's worth this committee considering at least some of them. But I think also the Environment Committee needs to be engaged with all of the reports of the Commission.
I leave this with you just as a suggestion, sir. But if you're willing to put some of those thoughts down on a piece of correspondence to the committee, just your thoughts, some ideas, it would give us a focal point. What I don't want to happen is a year from now we sit here and go, holy smokes, we wasted another year and there was no more hearings. And if we don't take action and do something, then that's exactly where we're going to be. So I just leave that with you if you'd be interested in generating a memo to the committee for us to consider. So, coming out of the committee, in terms of information requests, I only detected one, and that came from Madame Blachette-Lamotte, and it was kind of just a quick exchange between yourself and the Auditor General, and it was to do with the 23 audits versus 30. And at some point, Mr. Ferguson, you said you didn't have the figures in front of you, which we all understood, and Madame did too. And then there was, I believe, Madame, I don't have the instant answer, but I believe you then said, would you be able to get us those numbers? And Mr. Ferguson, there was a commitment you could. Is that an easy deliverable for you to this committee, sir?
I think it is. It's making sure that I know sort of where the 30 and the 23 come from, and once I know sort of where those two numbers are located, then I can explain the difference. Okay.
You can go by the blues for the detail of the question to catch it all. But it sounds to me like that's going to come. Everybody okay with that?
I mean, obviously, this is a discussion that we had in a subcommittee and something that we haven't even resolved yet in the committee as a whole, which we need to discuss at the next meeting. So I think the practice that you're taking right now is not known to everybody at this.
I don't have a practice, and because the committee was just at the end of it, we were no further ahead. One of the committee members was asking for information. I can't just leave it there, and in the absence of any rules, I'm trying to go as gently as possible, but you're not making that easy. What's your problem?
It's perfectly fine. I'm just pointing out that we should be discussing this at the next opportunity for committee.
Yeah, we will. I have no doubt. Ad nauseum, I'm sure we will discuss it. But anyway, what I'm hearing is that information will come to the member, and of course it'll be in both languages, and it'll be circulated to all members of the committee. That, I believe, concludes our hearing. I now need to put two questions to the committee. The first one is, shall vote 20 less the amount granted in interim supply carry? Agreed? Anyone disagree? Hearing none. That is carried. The second question to be put to the committee is, shall I, as the chair of the committee, report the main estimates to the House? This is debatable and amendable, but is there agreement? Agreed. Anybody disagree? Hearing none, then we have unanimous agreement on both of those. That concludes the work that we have, Madam Clerk. That takes care of all the legalities. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so we have concluded here. And so at this moment, I will thank Mr. Ferguson and Madame Sachs. Thank you so much. And again, and we say this a lot, but we mean it and you need to hear it, is we do appreciate the work you do for us as parliamentarians and more importantly for Canadians. Thank you both very much for being here today. We will adjourn this portion of the meeting and move to business. So this is adjourned. Do I have a motion to go into camera or we're going to do it in public? I have a motion.
Normally do, Chair. We do what we normally do.
I have a motion to go into camera. All in favor, please indicate. Thank you. Recorded vote. All in favor of the motion, please indicate. What's the motion, Mr. Chair? Motion is to go in camera to do business. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate. Thank you. Down. Those opposed. All those, we're in the middle of a vote, please. All those opposed to the motion, please indicate. Thank you. Motion is carried. We will adjourn for a moment, or suspend rather for a moment as we switch over.